The Walking Dead is a television show that first aired in 2010, based on the comic book of the same name. We open on a police car rolling up, and out steps Rick Grimes, our protagonist. He's looking for some gas, and shoots a little girl who had picked up a teddy bear, which is something the zombies would occasionally do in the first season. And last, which I'm sure was planned from the very beginning, just like the Horcruxes. The next scene flashes back to pre-apocalypse. Rick is talking to his loyal best buddy Shane about women not being able to turn off light switches. Rick then talks about his issues with his wife to his super best buddy who would never sleep with her, even if he thought Rick was dead. Not even then. They're then called to a high-speed chase. They arrive at the scene and they lay down a spiky long thing that'll pop the tires. A spike strip, okay? I thought it would that's so obvious. Anyway, the car hits it and crashes. Rick and the boys have a bit of a shootout. Rick is hit, but it's just a graze. He gets up and is fine. Shane is very relieved. But then, bam, surprise, extra shooter. He shoots Rick straight into a coma. He eventually wakes up from said coma and finds that the world has up and changed on him. And Rick's gonna learn that The Walking Dead ain't no laughing matter. Anyway, he leaves the hospital because there's a half-eaten elderly woman on the floor and goes outside. He spies a woman with no legs, so he steals her bicycle. But then she comes back to life, and this is Rick's first encounter with a zombie. He naturally freaks the hell out and rides all the way home to discover his family isn't there. He sits out the front of his house, feeling pretty down. He is then hit in the head with a shovel by an African American child. As Rick loses consciousness, he says, "Carl, I found you," mistaking the child for his son, because even though Rick has just woken up from a coma, is dehydrated, doesn't know if his family is alive or dead, and stole a bike from a half-lady, Rick still doesn't see race. It turns out the boy wasn't Carl at all, but the son of Morgan, a fellow survivor who brings Rick back to his house. Once Rick awakes, Morgan tells him all about the zombie situation, and Rick agrees that it isn't good. Morgan's wife is a zombie. This happened after they were married though, and he is having trouble killing her when she wanders by the house every now and then. Anyway, Rick decides to take them down to his old police station and gives them some guns, and they part ways. Goodbye, Morgan. Goodbye, African American Carl. Rick heads off in search of his beloved best friend Shane and his wife and son. We cut back to Morgan, who is sitting upstairs at his house, his rifle aimed out the window, struggling to kill his wife, who is wandering the street outside. He spots her but can't pull the trigger. Rick makes a quick stop to return the half-lady's bicycle. He decides to put her out of her misery. Rick is then driving along trying to contact anyone on the radio as he makes his way into Atlanta. A group of survivors just outside of the city hear the call but can't reply.
Hi.
It turns out Shane, Rick's wife Laurie, and his son Carl are amongst the group. Laurie wants to put up signs warning people away from the city, as it is full of zombies, but Shane says no, because all the zombies and whatnot. Laurie gets upset and wanders off. Shane follows her and tells her she can't be wandering off because she might be killed, just like they assume Rick has been. They then rub their mouths together to make sure neither one of them is infected. This is something they often do to ensure they are not tempted to bite each other, which is what zombies are commonly known to do. Good job, guys. Rick's car runs out of gas, so he finds a horse and rides on into Atlanta. It seems rather quiet to begin with, but then it isn't. Then there's lots of zombies, so Rick hides in a tank and his horse gets brutally eaten alive. He then hears a call on the radio. It's Glenn. He helps guide people out of the tank, but Rick mostly, and into a building where the rest of his gang are hiding safely. It's here we meet Andrea. She points a gun at Rick and blames him for drawing attention to the group's location. And T-Dog, he's also in the group. Then we meet Mel. He's causing issues for the group and does not like taking orders from anyone. T-Dog confronts him about this and Mel does a racism and then beats him up. Rick then hits Mel and handcuffs him to a pipe. Rick tells Mel about how racism isn't even good and stuff. Mel disagrees. Rick and Glenn then decide to cover their bodies in zombie blood and guts to blend in with the zombies because they're all smelly and stuff. They then get a van and take everyone back to Survivors Camp. Mel doesn't get to come. Meanwhile, back at the Survivors Camp, we're introduced to some of the other members of the group. Dale is keeping lookout from the top of his RV. He's the moral compass of the group.
9/11.
Laurie wanders off into the wilderness again. Shane shows up and they begin inspecting each other's bodies for zombie bites, and inside each other's bodies. They can't find any, so they become angry and moan loudly, because they're angry. Soon after, Rick and the gang make it back to camp. Rick steps out of the van and spots his family. Carl sees his father and begins running towards him. They are finally reunited, and it's a pretty nice little moment. Andrea is also reunited with her sister, Amy. Anyway, the next day, Daryl is introduced, Mel's brother, who is rather disappointed they left him for dead on top of a building. Rick decides to go back for Mel because he also left some guns there. So Rick, T-Dog, Glenn and Daryl head off in the van to rescue Mel. End of part 1.